right, thanks Abby and the Space Coast TPO for letting me come here to share with you some of what DOT is doing to move towards safe roads and safe speeds. Is this better? Okay. All right, so this starts with the Safety Vital Few Initiative, thank you. The idea behind the Safety Vital Few was that FDOT was truly going to change the culture of how we view safety and our safety projects and try to empower everyone within FDOT and outside of FDOT, our stakeholders, to bring up safety issues and come up with new safety countermeasures and prioritize safety for all modes of transportation. So how do we create this paradigm shift in our industry to really move the needle on safety? By taking the Safe System approach that Lorraine presented on earlier, and really ingrain this in our day-to-day processes and responsibilities. So how do we do this? This paradigm shift, we have to clearly define and communicate our priorities within the DOT and our stakeholders together as a unit. We need to align our agency resources and processes to emphasize safety. And we can't just stop there. We do have to measure the safety performance and progress. So after we get a project out there, we need to go out there and monitor it to make sure that it's really performing as it was intended to. So I'm going to focus a lot on the design side of things. So we start with context-based design and community vision. So context-based design is designing based on characteristics of the roadway. Who are your users and what are their needs? So is it more urban and maybe we need more pedestrian safety features, more connectivity, more crossing opportunities, more separation from our vehicles? Or is it more rural and has a history of lane departure crashes and maybe we need to figure out how we can mitigate for that? And then community vision, so early communication on what your vision is for your corridor. What is your ideal target speed for your roadways? Lorraine mentioned target speed is the speed that we want you to be driving, that you can drive safely, what you should be driving along that road based on its context. We found this quote that I thought was an important distinction to make. We talk a lot about safe speeds. Safe speeds is not about universally reducing speed. It's about matching the speed appropriate to the road conditions that exist. So in design, one of our governing documents is the FDOT Design Manual. We recently incorporated a speed management chapter that's broken down into 3 fundamental concepts: enclosure, engagement, and deflection. Enclosure gives that visual feedback or cue that your space is narrowing and you should slow down. Some ways we can do this are those raised medians and street trees or landscaping. We have more flexibility on incorporating landscaping into our projects than we ever did before, as they are now a proven speed management technique. So you asked about landscaping as a speed calming technique. We are proposing it on more and more projects. So how it works is the difference between landscaping and sod. Obviously the height. Sod is very low profile. There's nothing intimidating about sod in your median. But if you start giving it height and density on the inside, the outside, it's going to give them that enclosed feeling and incorporate or prompt slower speeds. The second one is engagement. So again, visual feedback to the driver. Something is happening, something is changing, and they should slow down. A couple ways we can do this. The modern roundabout is a great tool for this. It engages the drivers to yield before entering the roundabout. Again, raised medians, street trees, and additional pedestrian crossings will also engage the driver to slow down and potentially meter that traffic. And lastly, deflection. Deflection can be a horizontal or vertical movement of the driver. Some ways we can do this are raised mid-block crossings that force the drivers to slow down when crossing over them. Also raises their awareness of the pedestrian crossing, brings that pedestrian up higher into their eyesight. Again, the modern roundabout, great tool with the circular geometry that forces drivers to slow down as they navigate through the intersection. So our Florida Department of Transportation Design Manual and the Traffic Engineering Manual that we use have either been updated or are in the process of being updated to match this new safety-driven approach that we're taking. So the majority of the rest of the presentation is going to be on some projects that we've actually been able to incorporate these speed management techniques and tools. So the first one is OAKRIDGE Boulevard in Daytona. This is an existing 3-lane, one-way curb and gutter facility, a half-mile segment from the OAKRIDGE Bridge approach to State Road A1A, currently posted at 40 miles an hour with a context classification of C4, so basically means tight grid network, high pedestrian traffic, lots of residential and businesses in the area. And there's 3 signalized intersections today within that half mile. So this started as a resurfacing project. There's no such thing as just a resurfacing project anymore. Every project has the opportunity to improve safety. So this resurfacing project turned into a lane elimination project. It was 3 lanes one way, and we reallocated some of that pavement width to modify that typical so that it was better suited for all users. And we went through the lane elimination process that's now provided in the FDM. So just some of the complete streets and speed management techniques we were able to put on this job. We lowered the posted speed from 40 to 35 miles an hour based on the target speed. And then everything else that we incorporate on this project lends itself to actually achieving people driving at 35 miles an hour. We put in curbed islands. The curbed islands allow us to move the curb line in to get that tighter feel while still maintaining the existing outside curb line so that we could have minimal drainage impacts. We put in low profile landscaping, bulb outs, bike bailouts when we had to end the bike lane, and 3 new mid-block crossing opportunities. The lane elimination in itself was a speed management technique. We reduced the lane widths to their necessary widths to meet criteria. We put in a 7-foot green protected bike lane along this facility, so there is a physical barrier between the outside travel lane and the bike lane. And then we put in some horizontal deflection, which was one of those fundamental concepts for speed management. This project is currently under construction and will be complete next month. The next one is Orange Blossom Trail, or OBT, in Orlando. This was a safety improvement project. It is a 6-lane curb and gutter divided facility, a 1-mile segment from Holden Avenue to 34th Street, posted 40 miles an hour, with that same context classification of C4, with 3 existing mid-block crossings with PHBs, or pedestrian hybrid beacons, and 12 existing links transit stops. So the characteristics of this corridor, it's a combination of low income and multifamily housing, high transit use, and attractors and generators for peds and bikes on both sides of the road, along with very high volumes of vehicular traffic. So this 1-mile segment was identified as the most dangerous roadway in our district for bikes and pedestrians. Now, OBT has undergone a big transformation over the last 13 years through a multi-phased approach. So first, crossing opportunities and connectivity for pedestrians were enhanced in 2007 through the installation of 3 mid-block crossings. In 2012, we placed a raised median along the project. This was followed by a drop in the posted speed from 45 to 40 in 2014, And lastly, in 2020, we added those PHBs, or pedestrian hybrid beacons, at the 3 existing mid-block crossings. So you can see from the graph that bikes and ped crashes have been climbing regardless of the safety improvements that we were installing, and we needed more drastic measures to be taken on this road. So we were tasked with developing a project that puts bikes and peds at the forefront by using all of the speed management tools we had available. You'll see that every improvement on this project encourages drivers to travel at slower speeds, while also encouraging pedestrians to use this facility properly and safely.
Excuse me, can you back up one, please?
Yeah.
Real quick, Series 1, Series 2, what's that?
So it's the fatalities and the serious injuries for bikes and peds. So the blue would be the serious injuries and fatalities, and the orange is blue is serious injuries and orange is fatalities.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So it is 40 now. What was it before?
So it is 40 today. Prior to 2014, it was 45. With this project, we'll be dropping it to 30. Okay, so the PHB mast arm in the median offers a spot location sense of enclosure. It's a large vertical element that acts as a sort of gateway or tunneling feeling to the drivers. The fencing in the median is another vertical element which causes the drivers to feel enclosed slightly, but that wasn't the primary purpose actually of the fencing. It was to channel the pedestrians and encourage compliance with those designated mid-block crossings. The last enclosure element along the project is again the landscaping. The purpose of the landscaping was to both provide the drivers with that sense of vertical friction, as well as discourage the pedestrians from walking and staging at places in the median which are not designated crossings. So we actually chose landscaping that would be very uncomfortable if a pedestrian was going to try to cross. We picked prickly bushes and things that they might try once or twice, but they might be less inclined the next time. For engagement, we have, again, the pedestrian hybrid beacon. This acts as a pedestrian actuated signal at all of the mid-block crossing opportunities. So there were 3 existing on the project before we started designing. We're adding 3 for a total of 6 within the 1 mile. We have advanced crosswalk pavement markings. We have in-road lighting at all of our crosswalks, speed feedback signs, and landscaping in the median. All of these elements work together to keep the driver's attention on the road and changing elements without overloading the driver with too much information. And last, we have deflection. So our crosswalks incorporate both types of deflection. We had very tight right-of-way constraints on this project, and therefore we could not put in any of the chicaning or horizontal deflection. So we incorporated a sort of faux horizontal deflection through our striping. The standard travel lane widths on this job from the inside to outside were 10 foot, 11 foot, and close to 12 feet. Within the influence of the crosswalks, we squeezed that down to 10-foot lanes across the board. So there's just some extra pavement width for shoulders, but still through the striping, a sense that your lane is narrowing. The crosswalks, like you can see in the picture, it is a vertical deflection through the raised crosswalk. Both of these design elements deliberately give the driver a sense that they are deviating from their normal path of travel, which prompts a lower speed. For these raised crosswalks, it was important that we coordinated with the transit agency on these for the locations. We worked together to relay 2 links where we were able to place the crosswalks and what our design constraints were, and together we made modifications to both our locations to fit their needs, and they made some relocations to fit our constraints. We also designed for their specific bus type accommodations. So we designed these crosswalks to ensure that the bus's wheelbase would be able to stage solely on the table and not ever have to straddle that raised transition up. So it would never be awkward for the people trying to get on and off the bus. Another important element that was added to this project that isn't directly related to speed management but does relate to general bike and ped safety is the reduction of conflict points. So the image on the bottom left shows reduced radial returns on our side streets, so just tightening those throats up whenever we could. While this doesn't directly reduce the number of conflict points, it does reduce the time of exposure for the pedestrian in the roadway. Next, we have an example of where we consolidated 2 existing driveways to a property and replaced it with a single driveway of sufficient width. This reduces bike and ped exposure while they're navigating along the sidewalk and directly reduces the number of conflict points. And the last one is where we just reduce driveway width. This roadway had a lot of driveways that were unnecessarily large, and we brought them all into compliance with our standards, and of course coordinated with the property owners to make sure that we are still meeting their design vehicle needs. So here's a summary of all of the safety improvements that we're able to put on OBT. Fencing, LED lighting, PHBs, 3 additional mid-block crossings, in-road lighting, reduced radial returns, driveway consolidation, leading pedestrian intervals, hardened center lines, which is a way to extend the median nose in the signalized intersections, speed feedback signs, reducing the posted speed from 40 to 30, relocating or consolidating transit stops, enhanced pedestrian crossing pavement markings. There was a heavy education campaign prior to construction and will continue through construction, an enforcement campaign, and landscaping. All of which would not have been possible without heavy coordination and communication efforts. This was coordinating with the transit facility on the mid-block crossing locations, property owners for driveway modifications, Orange County for signal retiming efforts, and the OBT Development Board on speed reduction to make sure it was still in line with their vision for the corridor. So this gets a little bit into the weeds about the construction side of this project, but I think it's an important piece. When an FDOT project goes out for contractors to bid on them, they get a breakdown that looks kind of like this of all the pay items on the job summarized into categories based on work type. So asphalt work, drainage work, signal work. Why this is important is because it gives the contractor a general scope of work before they start digging into the plans. And because a contractor must be pre-qualified in at least 50% of these work types to be eligible to bid on that job by themselves without going into a joint venture with another contractor. That is a Florida statute that they have to follow. So in October, we led the job, all excited, and we got 0 bids back. So very disappointing. After a little bit of digging, we realized that the way the categories have been divided up only gave us 12 eligible contractors in the entire state, most of which were not in Central Florida. So we went back to our categories and determined how we could shift those pay items around to get a more balanced contract. With the revised categories, we had over 40 eligible contractors. So in December, we re-let the job, all excited. We got a single bid, and it came in at double our estimate. So at that time, we were faced with 2 options. We could go back to the drawing board, figure out how to break up this project, maybe break out the signal and ITS work into a separate project, delay construction on this job, or we could accept a bid that came in at double our estimate. So we did a deeper dive before we made that decision. We looked into what our original construction estimate really looked like. And we realized that our estimate of a lot of these new and specialty things that we were trying to put on the job were way too low. They weren't truly representing what it was going to cost. So what appeared to be an almost $4 million difference ended up being less than $1 million by the time we redid our estimate. We were comfortable accepting that on such a high-profile safety project, so we were able to move forward, and we will be beginning construction in a few months. So what did we learn from a project like OBT when you're trying to hit it with a lot of different safety ideas at the same time, some new and innovative ideas? Make sure you have a balanced contract based on your work type, so you're setting yourself up to get more competitive bids. Reach out to the people who are actually building your jobs and providing the products for those jobs. And make sure your estimate is accurate. We can design the best projects, but it won't mean much if we can't get them built. So the last project is the Daytona Beach Area Coalition. They produced a study that's evaluating proposed transportation solutions for segments of A1A and side streets. The study is considering capacity, safety, and multimodal enhancements along the corridors while minimizing impacts to all of the local businesses. This coalition is made up of public and private stakeholders. Together, they developed a shared vision for the key transportation corridors, constantly seeking community input on travel options, and together developing concepts and implementation strategies. So the study corridors that were chosen are State Road A1A from US 92 to Seabreeze, and then from Halifax to State Road A1A, US 92, Main Street, OAKRIDGE Boulevard that I presented on earlier, and Seabreeze Boulevard. So just to give you kind of a visual of what those corridors look like, State Road A1A in this section is a 4-lane divided curb and gutter facility, currently posted at 35 miles an hour, context classification of C4 with VOTRAN facilities and no bike facilities. The side streets range from 2-lane undivided and one-way pairs, varying in speed from 25 to 40 miles an hour, with some bike facilities and some on-street parking. I'm going to show a video of A1A in a minute, but these are just some quick snapshots of before and afters of what we're proposing on some of those side streets. On Seabreeze Boulevard, we repurposed a parking lane to accommodate a separated bike lane, and we enhanced the landscaping along that project. Main Street, we put in enhanced striping and raised intersections. And on US 92, we put in a 10-foot wide shared use path, raised crosswalks, a raised median to replace the 2-way left turn lane, and enhanced landscaping. All right, so this video is a little long. I'm going to see if I can try to jump around. All right, so we've got the raised crosswalks, some of the chicaning in there, so we alter that center line alignments. This was an existing mid-block crossings. Along the job, we put in another raised crossing. You can see we've got those triangles, is the striping that alerts you that there is going to be a vertical deflection happening. And we've got the landscaping in the median, some low profile, high trees, all Florida native, all done in coordination with the local stakeholders that ultimately will be maintaining that landscaping. Uh-oh.
Feels like you're speeding.
A little bit of speeding. Got it on double time. Okay, so I'll pause here. This is one of those, oh, come on now. There we go. All right, so this is one of those raised intersections. So unlike the raised crosswalk that just comes up and down over a short period, this is plateaued through the entire intersection. You can see around the curb returns, it basically comes up to full curb height. So we've got those bollards around the returns to protect as a barrier for our pedestrians waiting to cross the crossing. And then on that left-hand side, you can see those bollards right here. So we have retractable bollards that you can use for a couple of different things. In this case, A1A can use them for special events whenever they want to close down a leg of the intersection and just have it closed off for vehicles and only used for pedestrians. And it's going to be a lot more of the same. I think Lorene mentioned consistency and redundancy is also important. So there's a lot of that on this project. Driver expectation and everything is also important. So you don't want to throw too much at them all at once. We've got decorative pavers in there. So I wanted to point out this too. These circles in the pavement, those are those retractable bollards that we can use for a few different things. So this is a pull-off area that could be used for transit or truck deliveries. There's a lot of deliveries along this road. You don't want them having to load and unload their truck in that outside lane, backing up traffic. So these can be put down whenever a bus needs to come in or a delivery needs to happen. And then when they're done, you can put them back up. I'll show another one here in just a second. More chicaning. All right, and right there, so no deliveries, no buses. We've got the bollards pulled up, provides a wider space for the pedestrians to walk at that time. And then these are all of the stakeholders that were part of the Daytona Coalition that worked together to make this project happen. This first segment of A1A that was in the video is going to go to construction next year. And with that, I'll take your questions. Feel free to direct your easy questions to me, and Lorraine said she'll take the heavy hitters.
Thank you. I have a question about maintenance. So with all of these safety improvements, the cost of maintenance appears that it would be higher than what it is now. Is the department looking at that?
It's definitely a factor, and I think that's why we are talking about bringing in the stakeholders as early as possible, whether it's the landscaping, the pavers, the bollards, the signal upgrades. We recognize that when we leave and construction is done, that is going to be on you guys. So it's really just about working together, and you tell us what your needs are, what your challenges are, what your concerns about those upgrades, and I think we just have to work through it on a case-by-case basis. But yes, it's absolutely a consideration.
Thank you.
Pete, I'm coming to you. Well, I'm coming to Pete. I want to ask you a question. What has to happen for the bollards to go up and down? I mean, who has to talk to who and that kind of thing?
That is the one question I was hoping I was not going to get. I wasn't on the coalition, so I'm not sure what research was done. I had the same question. I'm not sure. So in other cases where those bollards are used, it's like a gate. So it'd be more of like a side street thing where you come in and you scan at a keypad. Those bollards would then go down. Once you pass, they come up. I'm not sure exactly how it works on A1A. It's a really good idea. I'm also dying to know how that works. Sorry.
Yeah, hi Lori.
Hi.
Orange Blossom Trail between Holden and 33rd Street, I'm familiar with that area.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty ugly concrete jungle. Awful lot of poor people use it. They walk to work, they take bicycles to work. So when I was looking at your slides, I really didn't notice how you handle bicycle traffic in that section.
So we had really, really tight right-of-way. We already had lanes that were kind of at their minimum width. The median is also just pushing the absolute minimum. So we really didn't have any extra width we could pull from. Ideally, if we did, we would have tried to provide an extra wide sidewalk or a designated bike facility. With a 6-lane curb and gutter, tight right-of-way, it unfortunately just wasn't possible. So right now the bikes will continue to do as they have been doing and riding along the sidewalk adjacent to the pedestrians.
And I'd like to congratulate you on the shared use driveways. I'm positive that was a challenge. And then I have a second question for you on the target speed limits. I know in Florida state statutes, it allows us to speed up to 5 miles above the posted speed without getting a ticket. So when you have a target speed of 40 miles an hour, do you mean 40 miles an hour or do you mean 45 miles an hour? And if you mean 40 miles an hour, then why isn't the target speed posted at 35?
So in an ideal world, the design speed that we base our criteria on, the target speed we want people to be driving at, and our posted speed will all be the same. Recognizing that Florida statutes is a little bit difficult to make big changes on, so I recognize that people are probably still going to be driving potentially 5 miles over and there won't be any repercussions for it. But everything we're doing, we're not just dropping the speed, right? That's not going to do anything. We're putting all of these speed management techniques in that we truly believe are going to force them to drive at that posted speed. So that is the goal.
Well, and this is just to add on to what you're trying to do. Talking to Maureen earlier, that things are incremental. And if we could get traffic to drive at 45 miles an hour right there on US 1, that's a giant step forward.
Yeah.
I get it, and it's going to take a while for things to happen.
Right.
Get them to drive at 45, see how that works, and adjust accordingly if we have to. And that's the big plan, is, you know, do the changes, get people to behave the way you want them to behave, and once the drivers behave that way, cool. Now I'd like to get into a question that I have. I was told bicycle, walk, you know, do your shopping, do your errands, and I fell into that hype. Put a basket on my bicycle, put a light on my bicycle, you know, got bright colored clothing, and I started commuting. And I found out first thing is that most of the big stores were more suburban than urban, and the speed limits were higher, 50, even 55, or, you know, 45 is high enough if you're going to run errands. Is that safe speed for me to be out there? Are you taking any measures to protect me, the bicyclist, or are you just taking a global picture right now and we'll fine tune it later?
Good question. So it's kind of all a part of what you've been talking about today. Nothing's going to change overnight. So, I mean, statewide, we're looking at all of these projects. I talked about context-based design. So we're looking at people that are making these commutes. We're looking at where are they coming from, where are they going to, how much bicycle traffic do we have on these roads, and that's where this whole thing comes back to is how can we make change, what is the target speed, what should people be driving based on all modes of transportation, who all of the users are, the cars are not the #1 priority anymore, and just determining what we can do to make big changes, and that might take multiple projects to get there.
Okay, and in the meantime, I get this kinetic energy vest in my bag to help absorb some.
It'll help in the meantime, maybe.
And we will continue on, and Lord have mercy on my bicyclist soul if even Lorraine texts and drives.
Until we get a project out there, be safe.
Okay, just a quick, in response to the costs of the landscaping and we had, in my municipality, we invested heavily in landscaping along US 1 when they redid the road. Did not take into account any maintenance. And ended up, we're now in the process of getting rid of the density, the safety measures, just making it grass. We can easily go in and mow it. However, anyone with a gardening background can tell you, if you invest heavily in those first 3 years with mulching and irrigation and really tracking it, over the long run, it's actually going to be cheaper to have that denser landscaping over the 10-year mark. It will be cheaper to have the density and landscaping than it is to have grass and have to have it mowed every week. So I hope that, I know that in the engineering departments, you probably don't have landscaping people or access to horticulture.
So we don't. We are engineers, but we have landscape architects that we can bring onto our teams. And I mentioned we have more flexibility now. So moving forward, I would imagine that that's probably going to be a work type that's required on almost all of our jobs, because we need the experts in the room on these projects telling us what's going to last, what's low maintenance.
Good.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have to invest heavily in maintenance the first 3 years, but then beyond that, it's much less of a burden.
Right. Thank you.
I wish we had known.
Hi, I just had a quick question. In that video, there were multiple times when it was shown the RRFBs being deployed. Are those, knowing that some communities are resistant to those, are those in the standard toolkit of FDOT's roadway design, or are those pre-existing or in conjunction with the City of Daytona?
So the RRFBs, or rectangular rapid flashing beacons, have been in our toolbox for a while now. It is still a tool that we are using on the appropriate roadways. There's some sections of A1A where we're able to do a series of them that they are still effective and working appropriately. Where they are not, maybe they're too sparse or we're just not getting the right compliance with them, that's when we move and start looking into things like the pedestrian hybrid beacons, which act more like a signal. From there, we have mid-block pedestrian signals, which is a version of the pedestrian hybrid beacon, but the signal head itself is different. So it actually goes red, yellow, green, exactly like a signal would. So we get even more compliance with that. So we look at all options, and it just depends on the road and what the traffic's like.
Thank you. You mentioned at one point the new speed management chapter or section of the FDM. I'm curious, was there any consideration given to like green stormwater infrastructure, LID, best management practices? Because obviously if you're putting trees and medians and doing things like that, it seems like a good opportunity to capture some stormwater and improve water quality at the same time. So I'm curious, is there any mention of that in that chapter?
Not that I'm aware of. That might be a little out of the depth of speed management. I'm really not sure. Lorraine, do you have any? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not really familiar with it either.
No problem. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could that be something that the landscape architect could bring to the table with knowledge of community issues?
You're right, yeah. They might be more knowledgeable on that subject. Thank you.
Yes, Lori. First of all, I would feel perfectly safe driving on any road you've designed. I was very impressed with your deep dive.
Thank you.
My question would go to in the how would I say this? You mentioned several, and again, I'm kind of new to this, so just bear with me. You mentioned several manuals, the traffic design manual, and then there was one other one, FDOT road manual.
It's the FDOT design manual and then the traffic engineering manual.
And I think that will do it for me. I'll do some homework and try and figure out where we're going from here.
Okay.
For the Orange Blossom Trail project, was there any consideration of using shared lane markings for bicyclists since you don't have any separate bikeway opportunities?
So the sharrows for the shared bike and vehicular lanes, I think technically we would have met criteria. I believe you can place those on 30 miles an hour or lower, and we did lower to 30 miles an hour. However, on OBT, 6-lane divided facility, it wasn't something that we were comfortable doing, putting the bikes on the road while we're doing all of these things to ultimately slow people down. It just sees heavy vehicular traffic, and it's not something I would have been comfortable signing off on. I prefer them on the side of the road with the pedestrians. So it's something we look at. Like I said, criteria-wise, technically I think we could have done it, but we have to balance the safety of all the users.
Well, I mean, if I could follow up on that. So faster cyclists have a lot of problems when they're on sidewalks. And
Mm-hmm.
so faster cyclists really need the support to be able to use the roadway. So particularly when it gets down to 30 miles an hour, that's when most of the faster cyclists are going to be very comfortable
Right.
using the roadway. So I think just having that official support of the shared lane marking is really useful.
So it goes back to the context-based design. Who are the users and what are their needs? This section along OBT are not advanced cyclists. They're not high-speed bikes. They're not road bikes. It's low-income housing area, a lot of people taking transit, and instead of walking to and from, they're biking back to their homes. So this is more of a leisurely biking community, so safer for them to be on the sidewalks than on the road.
All right, we're going to take one last question here so we can move on to our next presenter. If you have a question, we're going to have 30 minutes at the end where we're going to have some time, so write it down so you don't forget it.
Thank you, Lori. This is completely new topic for everybody, and we know that we're working all together just to fix the safety concern. But in terms of just address safety issues and follow up the manuals, there is some sort of problem when we talk to the roadway designer, traffic operation engineers. Is kind of the following the manuals is going to be challenging because FDM 212, the speed management strategy, we have different techniques or strategy, but if you want to follow that one, for example, for OBT, you have design variation documents because you change the median width along the corridor, and it doesn't, when we talk about the safety countermeasures, would you consider the FDM criteria, or you're thinking out of the box and, open any other sources and just document the design variation, or some sort of, because it's confusion between the roadway designers and the traffic operation and safety engineers. What is your approach to, address safety concern?
So, great question. A lot of things that we're doing. So we mentioned we're doing a culture change within FDOT. This is a big shift on how we look at our projects and how we coordinate together. So the speed management chapter was something that recently got incorporated, and that was a great stepping stone. So in-house production that I'm over, as well as when we advise our consultants on projects, we always explain this is not like a checklist. This is not something that you go through and say, okay, I can do this, I can't do that. We are absolutely more open than I think we ever used to be about new and innovative ideas, and that's why I said this idea is to empower everybody to bring up these concerns and bring up new ideas. We need to write a variation or exception because our manual isn't keeping up with our pace. then we'll do that.